Good morning. Page 201. The incidental cruelties which mark any difficult escape attempt were seen vividly enlarged in a bloody and confused breakout, also from Chekhov, and also in summer 1951. 6 prisoners escaped by night from a pit began. 6 prisoners escaping by night from a pit began by killing a 7th, whom they believed to be a stool pigeon. Then they climbed an old prospecting shaft out onto the steppe. The 6 prisoners included people from very different stripe, and they immediately decided to separate. This would have been the right thing to do if only they had a sensible plan. But one of them went straight to the settlement where the 3 workers lived right next to the camp and knocked on the window of his woman friend. His intention was not to hide, to wait a while under the floorboards or in the attic. That would have been very sensible, but simply to have a good time with her while it lasted. We recognized at once the characteristics of a professional criminal. He whipped it up for a day and a night, and then the following evening put on her former husband's suit and took her to a film show in the club. Some of the jailers from the camp were there, recognized him, and collared him immediately. 2 of the others, Georgians, thoughtlessly sure of themselves, walked to the station and got on a train to Karaganda. But from Chekhov, apart from the cattle trails and escapers' trails, there is no other way through to the outside world except this one, towards Karaganda by train. Along the line there are camps and at every station there is a security post, so they were both collared before they reached Karaganda. The other 3 took the most difficult road to the southwest. There were no people, but there was no water either. The elderly Ukrainian Prokopenko, who had seen active service, had a map and persuaded them to choose this route, telling them that he would find them water. His companions were a Crimean Tatar, turned into a criminal by the camps, and a foul, bitching thief. They went on for 4 days and nights without food or water. When they could stand it no longer, the Tatar and the thief told Prokopenko, "We've decided to finish with you." He didn't understand. "What do you mean, pals? Do you want to go your own way?" "No, to finish you. To finish you. We can't all get through." Prokopenko started pleading with them. He slit the lining of his cap. And took out a photograph of his wife and children, hoping to stir their pity. "Brothers, brothers, I thought we were all on our way to freedom together. I'll get you through. There should be a well soon. There's bound to be water. Hang on a bit, have some mercy." But they stabbed him to death, hoping to quench their thirst with his blood. They cut his veins, but the blood wouldn't flow. It had curdled immediately. Another striking scene, 2 men bending over one another on the steppe, wondering why he wouldn't bleed. 2 men bending over another on the steppe, wondering why he wouldn't bleed, eyeing each other like wolves, because now one of them must die. They went on in the direction which the old boy had pointed out to them, and 2 hours later found a well. The very next day they were sighted from a plane and captured. They admitted it all under interrogation. The camp got to know about it and decided to avenge Prokopenko by knocking off the pair of them, but they were kept in a separate cell and taken elsewhere for trial. You may believe, if you wish, that everything depends on the stars under which an escape begins. Your plans have been laid out oh so carefully, so very long in advance, but then at the crucial moment the lights go out in the compound, and your chance of escape, of seizing a lorry, goes up into smoke, whereas sometimes, when an attempt is made on spur of the moment, circumstances fall into place as though made to order. In summer 1948, in Kazakhstan, again, 1st Division, not yet a special camp, a dump truck was detailed one morning to take out a load of sand at a quarry some distance away and deliver it to the cement mixers. The sand pit was not a work site, which meant that it was not guarded and that the loaders, 3 long-sentence prisoners, one serving a tenner, the other 2 quarters, had to be taken to the lorry. Their escort consisted of a lance corporal and 2 soldiers, and the driver was a non-political offender, a trustee. Here was a chance, but chances must be seized, as quirky as they arrived. A decision had to be taken, and a plan concocted, concerted, all in sight and hearing of the guards who stood by while the sand was loaded. The biographies of all 3 were identical, and like those of millions at that time, first the front, then the German prisoner of war camps, escape, recapture, punitive concentration camps, liberation when the war ended, and, by way of thanks for it all, imprisonment by their own side. They hadn't been afraid to flee across to Germany. What could stop them from trying it at home? We finished loading. The corporal took his seat in the cab. 2 soldiers sat to the front of the lorry, back to the cab, with their Tommy guns trained on the convicts, who sat on the sand to the rear. As soon as they drove out of the quarry, the prisoners exchanged signals, threw sand in the eyes of the guards, and piled on top of them. They took away their Tommy guns and stunned the corporal with a blow from the gun butt through the cab window. The lorry stopped, the driver almost dead with fright. "Don't be afraid," they told him. "We won't hurt you. You aren't one of the dogs. Dump your load." The engine raced, and the sand, a precious sand, worth more than its weight in gold because it had brought them freedom, poured onto the ground. Here too, as in almost all escapes, let history not forget it, the slaves showed themselves more generous than their guards, didn't kill them, didn't beat them up, merely ordered them to remove their clothes and their boots and release them in their underwear. "What about you, driver? Are you with us or with them?" "You, of course. What do you think?" the driver decided. To confuse the barefoot guards, this was the price of their clemency. They drove first to the west, on the flat step you can drive where you like. Then one of them changed into corporal's clothes and the other 2 into those of soldiers, and they sped northward. All were armed. The driver had a pass. No one could suspect them. All the same, whenever their path crossed a telegraph route, they broke the wires to disrupt communications. They tied a stone to a rope, slung it over the wires and weighted them down, and then tugged at them with a hook. This took time, but gained them more in the end. They tore on at full speed all day long until the odometer had clocked up to 300 kilometers, and the petrol gauge registered 0. They began sizing up passing cars. A pobeda came along. They stopped it. "Sorry, comrade. We're only doing our duty. Please let me see your papers." VIPs they turned out to be, district party bosses visiting their causes to inspire, and maybe just to eat bishbarmak. Right, out you get, stripped. "Don't shoot us," the big boys implored. The escapers led them out on the step, tied them up, took their documents, and rolled off the pobeda. It was not till evening that the soldiers whom they had stripped earlier in the day reached the nearest pit, only to hear from the watchtower, "Don't come any nearer. We're soldiers like you." "Oh no, you aren't." "Oh no, you aren't. Not while you're walking around in your underpants." As it happened, the pagoda's tank wasn't full, and when they had driven about 200 kilometers, the petrol ran out. and there was nothing in the jerry can either. It was getting dark by then. They saw some horses grazing, managed to catch them, although they had no bridles, and galloped bareback. The driver fell from his horse and hurt his leg. They suggested that he get up behind another rider. He refused. "Don't be afraid, lads. I won't rat on you." They gave him some money and the papers from the Pobeda and galloped away. After the driver, no one ever saw them again. They were taken back to their camp, and so their lads had left their quarters. And so the lads had left their quarters and their 10-no change behind in the security officer's safe. The green prosecutor favors the bold. The driver kept his word and did not give them away. He fixed himself up in a kolkhoz near Petropavlovsk and lived in peace for 4 years. Love of art was his undoing. A good accordionist, he performed in the kolkhoz club, then competed at amateur festivals, first in the district center, then in the provincial capital. He himself had practically forgotten his former life, but one of the Jezkazgan jailers was in the audience and recognized him. He was arrested as soon as he left the stage, and this time they slapped 25 years on him under Article 58. He was sent back to Jezkazgan. In a category of their own, we must put those escapes which originate not in a despairing impulse, but in technical calculations and the love of fine workmanship. A celebrated scheme for escaping by rail was conceived in Kangair. Freight trains carrying cement or asbestos were regularly pulled in one of the work sites for unloading. They were unloaded within the restricted area and left empty, and 5 convicts planned their escape as follows. They made a false end wall for the heavy boxcar, and, what is more, hinged it like a folding screen so that when they dragged it up to the car, it looked like nothing more than a wide ramp convenient for wheelbarrows. Plan was this: while the boxcar was being unloaded, the convicts were in charge of it. They would haul their contraption inside and out, and open it out, clamp it to the solid side of the boxcar, stand all 5 of them with their backs flat to the wall, and raise a false wall into position with ropes. The boxcar was completely covered with asbestos dust, and so was the board. A casual eye would not see the difference in the boxcar's length, but the timing was tricky. They had to finish unloading the train, ready for its departure, while the convicts were still on the work site, but they couldn't board too soon. You must be sure that they would be moved immediately. They were making their last-minute rush, complete with knives and provisions, and suddenly one of the escapers caught his foot in a switch and broke a leg. This held them up, and they didn't have time to complete the installation before the guards checked the train, so they were discovered. A full-dress investigation and trial followed. The same idea was adopted by a trainee pilot, Batanov. In a single-handed attempt, door frames were made at the Averbakh woodworks for delivery to building sites. Work at the plant went on all around the clock, and the guards never left the towers. But at the building site, a guard was mounted only in the daytime. With the help of friends, Batanov was boarded up with a frame, loaded onto a lorry, and unloaded at a building site. His friends back at the woodworks muddled the count, and when the next shift came on, so that he was not missed that evening at the building site, he released himself from his box and walked away. However, he was seized that same night on the road to Pavlodar. This was a year after his other attempt, when they punctured a tire as he was escaping in a car. Excuse me. Sorry about the cat. I know, baby. Escapes. Successful and escapes frustrated at the start. Events which were already making the ground hot underfoot, the deeply thought-out disciplinary decisions of prison officers, sit-down strikes and other forms of defiance. These were the reasons why the ranks of the disciplinary brigade at Averbakh swelled steadily. The two stone wings of the prison and the disciplinary barracks, hut number 2 near the staff building, could no longer hold them. Another disciplinary barracks was established, hut number 8, especially for the banderists. After every fresh escape and every fresh disturbance, the regime in all 3 special sections became more and more severe. For the historian of the criminal world, we may note that the bitches in the Ekibetsu's camp jail grumbled about it. Bastards, time you gave up this escaping. Because you keep trying to escape, they won't let us breathe anymore. You can't get your mug bashed in for this sort of thing in an ordinary camp. You can. In other words, they said what the bosses wanted them to say. In summer 1951, disciplinary barracks number 8 took it into their camp boundary and made up their minds to tunnel. But too many tongues wagged, and the Ukrainian lads discussed it almost openly among themselves, never thinking that any member of the Bandera army could be an informer. But some of them were. Their tunnel was only a few meters long when they were sold. The leaders of disciplinary barracks number 2 were greatly vexed by this noisy stunt, not because they feared reprisals, as bitches did, but because they too were only 30 meters from the fence and had planned and made a start on a high-class tunnel before hut number 8. Now they were afraid that if the same thought had occurred to both disciplinary barracks, a dog pack would realize it and check. But the Ekibetsu's bosses were more afraid of escapes in vehicles and made it their chief concern to dig trenches a meter deep around all work sites and the living area, so that any vehicle trying to leave would plunge into them. As in the Middle Ages, walls were not enough, and moats too were needed. An excavator neatly and accurately scooped out the trenches of this kind, one after another, all around the sites. Disciplinary barracks number 2 was a small compound hemmed in with barbed wire. Inside the big Ekibetsu's compound, its gate was always locked. Apart from the time spent at the lime kilns, the disciplinary regime prisoners were allowed outside only 24 minutes exercise in their little yard. For the rest of the time, they were locked up in their barracks and crossed the main compound only to and from work lineup. They were not allowed into the general mess hall at all. The cooks brought food to them in mess tins. As far as they were concerned, lime kilns were a chance to enjoy the sun and rest a bit, and they took care not to overstrain themselves shoveling noxious lime. When on top of this, a murder took place at the end of August 1951. The criminal, Aspanov, killed an escaper, Anakin, with a crowbar. Anakin had crossed the wire with the help of a snowdrift during a blizzard, but had been recaptured a day later, which was why he was in the disciplinary barracks. See also Part 3, Chapter 14. The mining trust refused to have any more to do with such workers, and throughout September the disciplinary regime prisoners were not marched out at all, but lived as if in a regular prison. There were many committed escapers among them, and in the summer 12 well-matched men had gradually come together and in a safe escape team. Mohammed Gachi, leader of the Muslims in Averbakh, Vasily Pustarnikov, Vasily Bukin, Valentin Ryzhkov, Muchinov, a Polish officer who had made a hobby of tunneling, and others. They were equals, but Stepan Konovalov, a Cossack from the Kuban, was nonetheless the leading spirit. They sealed their compact with an oath. If any one of them blabbed to a living soul, his number was up. Either he would finish himself off, or the others would stick their knives in him. But the Ekbat suit's compound was already surrounded by a solid board fence 4 meters high. A belt of plowed land 4 meters wide followed the fence, and outside in a 15-meter forbidden area, and outside it a 15-meter forbidden area had been marked off, ending in a trench 1 meter deep. They resolved to dig a tunnel under this whole defense zone, so carefully concealed that it could not possibly be discovered before their escape. A preliminary inspection showed that the barracks had shallow foundations, and there was so little space under the floorboards there would be nowhere to put the excavated soil. The problem seemed insurmountable. Should they give up the idea of escaping? Then someone remarked that there was plenty of room in the loft, and suggested hoisting the soil up into it. At first, though, it wasn't worth considering, raising dozens and dozens of cubic meters of earth into the rafters without attracting attention. Through the living space of the barracks, which was constantly under observation, regularly inspected, raised it daily, hourly, and of course without spilling the merest pinch for fear of giving themselves away. But when they thought of a way to do it, they were overjoyed, and their decision to escape was final. What helped them to decide was their choice of a section meaning a room. The Finnish hut, originally intended for free workers, it had been erected in the compound by mistake, and there wasn't another like it anywhere in the camp. It had small rooms with 3 bunks. With 3 bunk beds wedged into each of them. Not 7, as everywhere else, so that each held 12 men. They selected a section in which some of their number were already living, by various means, voluntary exchanges, forcing out unwanted roommates, teasing and ridiculing them. You snore too loud and you something too much. They shunted outsiders to other sections and brought their own team together. The more strictly the disciplinary barracks prisoners were segregated from the camp at large, the more severely they were punished and bullied. The higher their morale standing in the camps became, the higher their moral standing in the camps became. Any request from the prisoners in the disciplinary barracks held the force of law for all in the camps. They now started ordering whatever technical aids they needed, and these were made on one or another of the work sites, carried at some risk past the frisking points, and passed with further risk onto the disciplinary barracks, in the dishwash soup, in a loaf of bread, or with medicines. Oh, I have to stop there, but that sounds so good. I can't wait. See you back here tomorrow. Have a good day. Thank you for listening.